I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to Barack Obama joining Twitter and Hillary Clinton joining LinkedIn, let us know when Lindsey Graham finally gets around to joining Friendster. Happy National Strawberries and Cream Day, sports fans. On our very own off-Broadway stage tonight, a Midwest side story, a funny thing happened on the way to the nomination, and the music McMahon. But first, Oklahoma, where the wind goes whipping down the pin. We just got word that Hillary Clinton is making her official campaign announcement on June 13th, but 'tis the season of Republican summits. And today, it's the Southern Republican Leadership Conference in OKC. Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, Rick Perry. You get the idea. Today, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker spoke first among the 2016ers and delivered a new argument for why he's different than the rest.
There's a lot of great people out there who are thinking about or are currently in the race for president on the Republican side. And there are some people, there are some of those folks, particularly folks in Washington, who are really good fighters. They're fighting the good fight, they're waving the flag, they're carrying the banner, but they haven't won a whole lot of victories yet. And then there's some other folks out there that have done a really effective job of winning elections. A lot of them are friends of mine, governors or former governors who got elected and then got reelected. They've won a lot of elections, but they haven't taken on a lot of those fights. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, part of the reason why I'm even thinking about what I'm thinking about, and we haven't announced anything yet, it won't until after the end of June when our state budget is done, I have yet to see anyone in the field or emerging field who's done both. I think going forward, we need someone who can fight and win, not just at the ballot box, but can fight and win the battles we need to move this country forward with common sense conservative reforms. That's what we need to move America forward.
All right, Mark. First of all, reminder our viewers to catch all the action from the SRLC over the next couple of days on our website. But coming back to Scott Walker, how politically potent do you think that argument will prove to be?
50% of it is pure dynamite. Getting elected 3 times in Wisconsin, voters all across the country on the Republican side say unions, Democrats, threw everything they had on him, he could win. It's the other side of it where I think he's going to run into problems potentially. Jeb Bush eventually is going to argue that he was a more successful governor than Scott Walker was. People are going to start picking at his record in Wisconsin. He definitely can win elections. I think people are going to raise issues, at least, about is he been as successful a governor with the economy, particularly, as some say.
In the end, the electability argument gets you so far. And there's no doubt that Walker's record as a fighter and a winner in a blue state matters a lot. It's a good calling card. But this doesn't take the argument to the next level, right? In the end, people care about the ideas and what you're going to do for them and how you're going to actually put policies in place that they agree with. And we haven't heard, we've heard some of that from Walker so far, but this is more of a placeholder to me than anything close to a closing argument. Luckily for him, he doesn't need a closing argument yet. We're not there.
Right. The one thing this has in addition is confidence. And one of the things I've been struck by with Scott Walker, and I think part of his success within the Republican electorate is he's confident. He acts like a guy who thinks he can win. He
acts like a guy who's won 3 elections in the last 5 years.
He's a warrior.
Yes, he is. And looking at it, there's no doubt that there's the same kind of hunger on the Republican side now for a winner that there was on the Democratic side back in 2008. There's no doubt about it.
All right. In other Republican presidential campaign news, Jeb Bush has a long way to go to convince Americans that he's different enough from his brother George W. After struggling on the Iraq question last week, John Ellis Bush this morning in Concord, New Hampshire, was speaking to the press and was asked what issue he's most different than his brother on. Here's how he chose to answer.
In Washington, during my brother's time, Republicans spent too much money. I think that he could have used the veto power. He didn't have line item veto power, but he could have brought budget discipline to Washington, D.C.
So that was his choice to go with the question of budgets in the aughts. Is that an answer that the Bush campaign will like, or is it just not enough to separate himself from his brother?
Well, the Bush campaign clearly will like it. They chose it. They decided that's where they want to fight. If there's going to be I'm going to be my own man, here's how I'm going to demonstrate I'm different from my brother. He's decided that the fiscal terrain, for which George W. Bush was criticized by a lot of conservatives, is safer terrain than the foreign policy terrain. I don't know whether, given how seminal for voters the Iraq and foreign policy matters, Iraq primarily, but foreign policy is, I don't know if that's going to be enough
Here's what I think was best about that answer for him. It's what he clearly thinks. He governed as a fiscal conservative in Florida. He vetoed a lot of spending bills. He clearly thinks Republicans spend too much in the aughts. And I think that answer, because he's speaking from his heart, still being respectful of his brother, was perfect pitch for him.
Well, someone is going to come along and ask him, though, and as we know, he's going to get asked about a lot of things about whether he disagrees or agrees with his brother. Someone's going to look at that answer and say, hey, what about Medicare Part B? You know,
and he should say what he thinks.
You're saying your brother didn't go far enough, didn't use his veto pen enough. Your brother spent a lot of that money, buddy. He didn't just not veto things.
Coming back, but I thought that was obviously better than the Iraq thing.
Well, pretty low bar. Okay, new reports say that ISIS now controls about half of Syria. Man. At a cabinet meeting today discussing the threat posed by Islamic State militants, President Obama described his strategy thus.
We're going to continue to go after ISIL, get a strong deal that prevents Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
On the ISIS part, as for how to stop them, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said at his briefing today that ground troops are not an option.
The president is not going to be in a position where he's going to consider a large-scale U.S. military deployment. And for those who are calling on a change in strategy, I would encourage them to be specific.
And now, from the other side of the aisle, here's how Senator John McCain savaged in his own inimitable style the administration's strategy today at a hearing on ISIS and Syria.
And 2 days ago, when a review should have been well underway to correct an incoherent strategy that is woefully under-resourced, the White House Press Secretary, Josh Earnest, said, "Are we going to light our hair on fire every time there's a setback?" I would point out for my colleagues that maybe his hair isn't on fire, but there are bodies on fire in the streets of Ramadi.
So, Mark, this issue, the issues around ISIS, ISIL, the Islamic State, have really blown up with Ramadi this week. Do you think that congressional criticism and the facts on the ground are now at the point where they're going to compel President Obama to change course?
First of all, I should say I was on my BlackBerry because I got an email with it was from Hillary Clinton, and the subject line was, "I want to meet you." So I figured I better read it. It turns out it was not directly for me.
Yeah.
The president will not change policy.
You and 250 million other Americans.
The president's not going to change his policy because the White House is right. The critics don't really have a comprehensive plan that will work. If facts on the ground change more, the Joint Chiefs are going to have to recommend a plan, but he will not change it based on the criticism of the Hill because they don't have an actual comprehensive plan for him to change.
Here's the thing where we know about President Obama at this moment. At this moment, he is in a mindset of, I'm going to do what I want to do. And to the extent that I can get away with doing what I want to do, I'm going to do it. He's commander-in-chief, and what he told Jeff Goldberg today at The Atlantic, or in an earlier interview this week was published today, he said, I don't think we're losing.
Yeah.
He believes still in his strategy. And at this point, not just the lack of an alternative, but the fact that I think he still actually thinks that they're on the right path means he's not going to change course anytime soon.
Bad week, though, in the region. All right, Hillary Clinton, I want to meet you, too. And coming up, the exciting sequel to our Iowa focus group. This time, it's the Republican voters. Coming up after a word from our sponsors.
Yesterday, we showed you parts of our Democratic focus group in Iowa, which we did with Purple Strategies this week in Des Moines. Tonight, it's the Republicans' turn. We asked them about the Bush family name, about whether a Republican can beat Hillary, and if they're overwhelmed by choices in the vast field of declared and likely GOP presidential candidates. Do you look at this whole Republican field, all 12 or 14 or 15 or 9, however many end up running, do you look at that field and think, that's a pretty good field, that's a good group to choose from?
I'm a little overwhelmed.
You're a little overwhelmed.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's like, whoo, there's lots of people.
I think that it needs to be whittled down, and then to hopefully, somebody strong will rise to the top. And I think that's scary right now with that big, wide open field. I don't see a really good, strong candidate.
Does it matter to you whether that candidate has the potential to attract more women voters? Does that matter to you? Do you think about it that way at all?
No.
You don't think about it that way? No one. Okay. Does it matter to you whether the candidate who you support might have the prospect of being able to attract more support from Hispanic voters or African American voters or other ethnic minorities? Does that factor into your thinking at all, or do you just say that's not part of it?
Not part of it for me either.
Not part of it. Okay. How many of you know much about Scott Walker?
What I like about him, I think he's battle tested at least. I'm open to anything, but We need somebody who's battle tested, I think, but that will fight back, who will...
Strong personality.
Yeah, and I think he will.
One of the things that's true about Scott Walker that's unusual is the fact that he doesn't have a degree from college. Is that important to you? Do you think a president should have a college degree, or is that irrelevant?
It's irrelevant.
Let me ask you, I'm asking a show of hands. Is there anybody in the room who thinks that not having a college degree is disqualifying? You wouldn't vote for someone without a college degree?
I hate to say that, but I think that it's bothersome to me.
Right. Because?
I don't know why. I can't tell you, but it just strikes me as I think that the President of the United States should have a college degree.
If he was nobody, I think it would bother me, but because he's been a successful politician and a good governor, it doesn't bother me because he's proved himself.
He's already jumped the hurdles.
Yeah.
He comes across as being genuine and having his thoughts in order about a lot of issues.
Obviously, the people in Wisconsin have elected him 3 times in the last 6 years, so...
What do you know about Marco Rubio?
I like his background, and I just like the way he looks. And I saw him a little bit on TV last night. I thought, man, he's talking good stuff.
Okay, you got a little bit of a crush on Marco Rubio.
I do. I think the kids call it crushing now. I'm crushing on him.
You know, he is the American dream. You know, I think that's essential. That folks get refugees from Cuba, and he built himself up, and so he's kind of a self-made man. I think he still gives a lot of credit to his parents and stuff, but I think that's what we look for in the United States.
You hear some Republicans who say, I think he looks like the future, but the last time we voted for someone in the middle of their first term in the Senate, we got Barack Obama, and he wasn't experienced enough to be president. So does it bother anybody in the room, the idea that Marco Rubio has only been in Washington for a few years and hasn't even finished one term in the Senate? Does that bother anybody?
I don't think Obama's problem is his lack of experience. It's his lack of integrity and his pushing things through and all of that. That has nothing to do with lack of experience. It's a character issue.
I second that.
So it wouldn't bother me.
Last week in the media, there was a lot of discussion about Jeb Bush and his views of the Iraq War, the war that his brother started. And I just want to know how much you guys have heard about that.
I wish he would have, and he should have known that question was coming.
He was in a hard place, and those real good politicians can shuffle ball change out of those places like that.
It's in the past. Just let it go. Like he said, learn from it. Move on. There's more crap to worry about right now that's right in our faces.
Is there anybody in this room who is, A, who thinks Common Core is important, and B, who knows about Jeb Bush's position and is bothered by it? Nobody in the room.
I have to, what is Common Core? I guess I don't understand that.
In terms of Jeb Bush, have you heard about his positions on immigration, and do they bother you? Anybody in the room?
I've not heard his position on it.
If it's not any of those specific things that bother you, why is there nobody in the room who's either more enthusiastic or more curious about him?
I think he's his own man, but I think it's just such a negative connotation when you see that Bush name that people get turned off, and they don't even know why they get turned off.
Well, and I would agree. He's got a name problem that he's got to have to overcome.
That's the thing he's fighting. I think he'd make a good candidate, but I do think it's just because of the name, he just is such a negative connotation that people just automatically get turned off.
I don't know if he can beat Hillary, because it goes back to a Bush versus Clinton. What's going to happen? That scares me. I don't have a problem with him or learning about him, but I am really worried.
Wouldn't be any different than the Clinton side. So if we are looking for electability, maybe take both out and start with somebody new.
I think our country's a country, and it should be run by like a business, and I don't think it should be run like a family business. And that's what's going to happen, I think, if we get him in. And I just think he seems to fall a little bit into his brother's footstep. He's not anywhere near as charismatic as a dad, and that's too bad.
It's too bad that that's his last name, because I think people are really going to hold that against him, and I don't think they should. That's not fair, but it's reality.
What do you guys know about Carly Fiorina?
She's a woman.
That is true.
She talks pretty straight. I think she could hold her own with anybody in a bar fight or a discussion,
Try against Hillary and see how that
She could give Hillary a run for her money.
Oh, yeah, I think she could.
I've heard positive things about her, that she is a good communicator and that she does know what she's talking about. I've heard positive things.
Nobody's enthusiastic about the idea of another Rick Perry run?
I like Rick Perry, but I don't think he would be elected. He's just kind of a third-place horse, so to speak.
So, Crystal, Are you interested in Huckabee this time around, or do you feel as though his time has passed?
No, I'm interested. I think he was smart to be on TV and get his name out there. So he is one I'm watching.
Okay. And what about you, Craig?
I liked him. Used to watch him on his Fox show quite a bit.
Right.
And I think he's very intelligent. I think he really means what he says. But again, I don't know if he can bring the whole. I'm just so hung up on somebody who can bring everybody together.
I believe he's going to continue to stand on his morals, and we need that. We need somebody who's going to stick to our Constitution and stick to what our founding fathers wanted our country to be.
I think he's too conservative for the country. Maybe not for Iowa, but for the country as a whole.
What has Rick Santorum done wrong? He won the Iowa caucuses last time, and I got a bunch of Iowans here. Crystal, are you not interested in Rick Santorum?
Said he didn't win.
He didn't win.
So why would I put all of our energy behind him again?
Right. The fact that he didn't become the Republican nominee, you feel like he won. I had his chance last time.
That might be harsh, but yes.
Well,
he had the momentum coming out of Iowa, and he
did
did not do it. So what makes us think that he could do it again the next time? I think that's what you're getting
Yeah,
at.
what's different this time than last time?
And that happens in Iowa here a lot, is the people that we like or choose doesn't seem to follow through. Or it's not like they're not following through, but the country doesn't follow through.
And it seems like every time we go in, look at the Santorum, look at Huckabee, they're too conservative for the country. And as soon as they leave Iowa, they're done. Right. They're done. Right.
When we come back, the counterpoint from our Democratic point guard, Steve McMahon, after these words.
Our guest tonight, Democrat Steve McMahon, who works at the bipartisan firm Purple Strategies, who are our partners on putting these focus groups together, including the ones we did last week in Iowa. Steve joins us now from our D.C. bureau. So, Steve, Jeb Bush, as in our New Hampshire focus group, sort of the best thing you could say about how he comes out of that group is he's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I was sort of struck by the observation that he doesn't have the charisma of his father, which is frankly not a way I've ever heard George H.W. Bush described before. But you're absolutely right, Mark. We saw this in New Hampshire. We saw it now just in Iowa. And the Republican Party primary voters and caucus attenders in Iowa are not very excited about Jeb Bush, and many of them don't think he can win, which is interesting because, even the people who aren't very excited about Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side do think she can win. So I think that's a really big problem for Jeb Bush.
Well, I thought it was really striking, Steve, in the point you just made, which was that back in New Hampshire, when we talked to Republicans there, they didn't like him for ideological reasons. They said he's not conservative enough. He's the Common Core is a problem. Immigration's a problem. These Iowans didn't care about any of that. They cared about the name and electability. And so it's like he's got two sets of problems with two different sets of voters, but it's all bad.
Right. That's exactly right. Two sets of problems, two different groups of voters. They're all bad. And by the way, I think if you went into New Hampshire and you started talking about, the fact that it's a Bush and do we really want to do this again and can he win, I think you would have heard those same things. And likewise with the Iowa voters, some of them didn't really know what Common Core was. But if you explained it to them and they understood it better, I think they would object just like conservative voters do everywhere. Remember, the Iowa caucus attendee on the Republican side is very conservative. The caucus produces winners like Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee, not exactly people who are mainstream Republicans or who could win a general election. So they would all be troubled by George Bush's record as a governor.
Steve, a lot of nice things.
I think you mean Jeb Bush, but that's all right.
A lot of nice things.
I'm sorry, Jeb Bush.
A lot of nice things said
they
about.
They all run together. They're all Bushes.
A lot of nice things said about Marco Rubio in that focus group. The Republican Party has never, in the modern era, nominated someone his age, his relative inexperience. What is driving, you think, based on that group and what else you've seen? What is driving this attraction to Rubio?
Well, it's really interesting, and I'll say this, I'm not trying to hurt Marco Rubio, although it might have that effect. I would say that he is the Barack Obama of the Republican Party right now. His life story is captivating to people. When he stands in front of a room and he talks about his immigrant parents and his father who came from Cuba and stood behind the bar in the back of the room so that Marco Rubio could stand in front of a podium on a stage in front of the room, that just melts your heart. It melts my heart. I think he's got a very compelling story. And people are drawn to him, and I would say Marco Rubio is a rocket ship on the launch pad in Iowa and nationally.
You know what impressed me?
I think he's going to be the nominee.
People sort of.
I think he's going to be the nominee.
People kind of made fun of him for announcing the same day as Hillary Clinton, maybe being overshadowed. But it's pretty clear from that group that a guy who's not been to Iowa very often, his message is burned in. People know about his story, and that's obviously one of the most compelling things he's selling.
His message is burned in, and I actually think that the Rubio campaign has really executed beautifully, because standing on the podium announcing the same day as Hillary Clinton is a little bit like stepping up onto the podium and in a presidential debate. If you're the challenger, it immediately gives you stature, and if you perform well, it really puts you in a good position. I think Marco Rubio has done himself nothing but good every single day in this campaign so far.
Steve, I'll tell you, sitting there in the room with those Republicans, we talked about Marco Rubio just now, and there was a little bit of excitement around Rubio. The other person around whom there was excitement, a genuine kind of like a little electrical buzz in the room, was Carly Fiorina. I guess my question to you is, A, what do you think it is that they find appealing about her? But secondly, given that that is true, and it's been true in a bunch of places around the country in the last few months, why is she not considered a top-tier candidate in the Republican field?
Well, I think one of the reasons she's not considered a top-tier candidate is because people haven't seen this kind of research. And a lot of times what you see in research like this is a preview of the future. And I was struck by exactly what you were struck by, which is the strength of Carly Fiorina among this group. And frankly, if you think about what animates Republican primary voters more than anything else, it's who can, usually it's who can hate Barack Obama the most. But in this case, it might be who can stand up and go toe-to-toe with Hillary Clinton the best. And somebody in that group mentioned that Carly Fiorina would give Hillary Clinton hell. And I think that's why she may be the underdog, the candidate to watch in Iowa, because everybody's aware of Marco Rubio, but nobody's aware of Carly Fiorina. And to the extent that she goes hard after Hillary and she becomes the anti-Hillary, she's going to become more and more attractive to that very conservative Iowa Republican caucus voter.
Steve, just quickly go back to Bush. If you were a Bush advisor and that was a focus group conducted for the Bush operation and you watched it, what was the one or two sentences you'd say to Jeb about what he needed to do in reaction to it?
Well, I think Jeb needs to strike out some very clear positions on some issues that are important to conservatives. He needs to stop talking about his brother in the past and start talking about the future. He needs to be aspirational, positive, and he needs to tell people why he can take us to a better place than we're sitting in today. And frankly, he hasn't done any of that.
Okay. Steve McMahon of our partners, Purple Strategies, did the focus groups with him. Steve, thanks so much. When we come back, our handy guide to your Memorial Day weekend right after the break.
Tomorrow, don't go to the beach. Or if you do, bring your phablet, because we're live streaming the Southern Republican Leadership Conference on BloombergPolitics.com.
Remember, we're on thrice a day now at 5 and at 8 and just this in at 11. Until tomorrow, sayonara.